In-depth coverage of the top stories and breaking news when it happens. News Radio 1080 KRLD.
The Institute for Predictive Analytics in Criminal Justice out of Tarleton State University, we started looking at some of these mass shootings that took place and have taken place around the country. So what we were able to obtain is data from the Violence Project, which is a nonprofit group. This data dates from 1966 all the way up to May of 2021. And it really does encompass all of the mass shootings that have taken place throughout the United States, over 50 years worth of data. And we found some really, really interesting patterns that relate to the actual individual that engages in mass shooting, as well as the location that they choose for these events.
Looking at some of the findings there, it's, that they're almost always committed by someone who knows someone there or knows the area they're going into. It's not like someone just walks into a place and starts shooting.
Right, for the most part, right? So that doesn't mean that you won't have any cases of people just sort of showing up somewhere randomly and shooting at people. But what we did find is that the majority of them actually had some sort of a relationship, whether that was to the school or to the workplace, that they actually chose in order to engage in violence. In addition to that, we found out that most of them were males, that most of them were younger than 30 years of age. Historically, most of them have been whites, even though that is changing, slowly becoming more demographically diverse in terms of who the shooters are. Most of them suffer from mental illness, and they have slightly over, 65% of them had some sort of a criminal history or have been known to the authorities prior to the incident.
That mental illness thing, too, sticks out, because I know that's something that schools now are focused on, that, we need to make sure, we've done a great job teaching kids how to memorize, but we need to make sure they're developing socially and emotionally, too, because it's not going to be something that just happens all of a sudden.
Right, and so part of the challenge is, first of all, who actually determines that the person has a mental challenge, right, or a mental issue. And so you've got to have a clinician, somebody that's been studied in the area, that is certified to be able to do that. And then secondly, how do you really, from a law enforcement perspective, how do you really are able to sweep and find out and identify before they actually commit the crime that they are suffering from some sort of an issue that will manifest into a violent crime? And let me highlight the fact that most people that suffer from a mental illness are people that will never commit a violent crime, right? So, but we do have some that, in fact, sadly, engage in violence, and it's just very hard to be able to determine those that are going to commit violence versus those that are not.
Well, that's interesting, too, because it's not just saying so-and-so has a mental illness. It's will they be prone to violence with it, too? So, you have to draw a distinction even once you do have a diagnosis.
Right, and one of the things that we found in our study, for instance, is the fact that a lot of them actually post something online prior to committing a crime, right? Or they manifested, because we looked at all the way back to 1966 where the online platform was not available. So, what they did is they let somebody know, they wrote something on a piece of paper. Nowadays, they do it through social media where they actually post something and says, oh, by the way, we are interested in doing the following things, or we're going to reenact the following fantasy, at our workplace or at the school. The problem with that is that some of them actually posted that literally minutes before the event took place. And so law enforcement doesn't have the capability of really being able to identify, first of all, who is serious and who's not. And then secondly, who is going to commit the crime and make it reality if they posted just a few seconds prior to the incident taking place.
Where do we go from here? What can we do with this information? The focus now has to start looking at practical applications for it.
That's right. Some of our audience and some of the folks that, that are going to be listening to this interview are individuals that are working somewhere or are in charge of a certain entity. So, to employers, make sure that you are aware of what exactly, and you remain vigilant on an employee discipline, on those individuals that you're disciplining, for one reason or another, to make sure that there is some sort of a social media sweep and to ensure that, that they are not going to act out a fantasy that they posted, because most of them are going to be frustrated, and some of them, or rather a few of them, may actually manifest in a form of violence. Now, schools and universities, we need to remain vigilant. We also need to start looking at social media very seriously and do that on an ongoing basis, have, in fact, units that would be focused on social media sweeps on an ongoing basis to assist law enforcement in communicating some of that information to them. And then to folks at home and family members, keep an eye out, right? A lot of times we parents are clueless about what our kids are doing on a social platform or what they're actually telling their friends. And parents are sometimes shocked to find out that their kids went out there and engaged in violence. Sometimes they're the last ones to find out. And so we just need to be situationally aware and be in tune with what our kids are doing.